My name is Cataldi. I am the education evangelist for Epic Games here at the View Conference in Italy.
So you guys are talking about education. Give us an example of how Unreal Engine 4 is being used for education today.
Unreal Engine it's great because pretty much every university, many schools all over the place, not just universities, but many trade schools are using Unreal Engine to teach game development. But there's quite a revolution going on in visualization in general. People are thinking about the way decisions are made, and they're looking at how people make decisions with regard to, do I look at a piece of paper, or do I look at a video and decide whether I'm going to build this building? Or if I want to buy a car that costs, $1 million, am I going to buy that car based on a brochure you hand me? Or do I look at a video of a cool car and decide that I want this kind of trim for the interior, these kind of tires? And they don't like that as much as being able to look at all these decisions in real time and make these choices in a more interactive way, right? So something like Unreal Engine is a very important tool for game development. It's been around for 21 years and been making professional game for nearly that long. So it's entrenched in video game programs and CS programs throughout North America and the world. And one of the cool things that I get to do as part of my job is travel all over the world. I just got back from Moscow, Russia, doing a conference there and visiting universities and doing presentations. And the rest of our time in Italy here will be spent in visiting universities and doing presentations. People who have been teaching with Unreal Engine, for years now, whether it's version 4 or the previous version 3. But as I was mentioning, what's exciting is that the business in general is starting to look for resources to tell the story and to make decisions in a different way. They want people at IKEA and at Ford and at GM and at Boeing. And they're starting to look for people that can work in a new tool set. Because if, like I said, you're going to buy a new car and it costs $1 million, are you going to look on a piece of paper to make that decision? If you need to build a stadium and that stadium costs $2 billion, and you need to see how people are going to move through that stadium, and you want to know what it looks like and feels like to stand in the 50-yard line, or to see how concessions are going to flow through that space, or how parking is going to go from parking into the stadium. It's much better to take a team of people in virtual reality, for instance, through a guided tour of a stadium that no one has spent a moment building yet, but that can be built digitally and walk through and move through. And I'm not talking about crude rendering, I'm talking about things that look physically real with lighting that's coming in that you'd have to squint because of the glare of the sun. Those things are very exciting to people, and it's very exciting to people that are making decisions at that scale, if that makes sense.
So it's not just future video game developers anymore. It's really pretty much any enterprise that people want to get involved in?
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the important things from an education perspective, right? And I know I just said a lot, right? But universities are of course teaching video game development. Computer science divisions are of course looking at it because Unreal Engine is a C++ based engine, object-oriented tool set, and we expose 100% of the source code. So you can go right now and download the engine and download all the source code to the engine. And if you are learning computer science, you can look at how a professional tool like this is made, every line of code of it, and learn from it. But you can also be an architecture professor, or you can be a designer, or you can be a business leader and say, how are we going to do business in the future? How are important decisions going to be made? And how do we train a workforce that's ready to work in tomorrow's Boeing, or tomorrow's General Dynamics, or in the medical industry that wants to teach new doctors how to do surgery without the risk of messing somebody up, virtual surgery. Or in an industry where training doesn't mean that I have to describe the bottom of the ocean to you in an abstract term, but that you and I can go to the bottom of the ocean and look at it together, and I can point to the things and we can talk about it in a virtual space. Or where I can have a lecture from Einstein, you know. Things are changing, and it's really exciting. It's this kind of tool that's allowing it to be visualized in a certain way, but what it's going to require is the resources coming out of schools to make it a reality. Does that make sense?
Yep, and we're just starting to see the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, PlayStation VR. You got Google Daydream coming out very soon. How are all these VR components impacting the teaching and education with Unreal at schools, that what you're seeing out there?
So there's a lot of enthusiasm from all the schools to work in virtual reality. Of course, it's really a hot topic at schools. We've helped to make it really easy. Unreal Engine has a unified platform for delivering to all those devices, right? Now you don't have to do anything but make your project and decide whether it's going to go to the Vive or the Oculus, you know, or to the PlayStation, and even to the mobile Gear VR or the Daydream devices. You don't have to make a special camera for Oculus and a special camera for the Gear or controllers for them. It's a unified platform. You develop it, and then you decide whether it's going to go to this device or that device. So we made it really easy for researchers in particular to develop their product and let them decide how it's going to go to whoever the beneficiary of that research is going to go to, or even lower level education. You know, I'm talking about secondary education and primary education, and even all the other possibilities. You think about people that are constrained to hospital beds that are going to be there for weeks, you know, inability to move. You know, how can they learn? How can they put on? How can they escape that reality, right? Yeah, so there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of people doing research in particular about that. How can we provide people that have limited mobility an opportunity to escape that reality?
We're also seeing at the same time Microsoft releasing Minecraft EDU. There's a new Civ 5 EDU version coming out next year. How do you see that converging with what you guys are doing from a video game engine perspective, having virtual reality out there and now having education, video games being used for education?
I think it's all great. It's a great convergence. Epic's always been a bit of a leader in that space. One of the things that I think is quite unique about what we're doing is that when you download Unreal Engine, you are downloading, there's only one version of Unreal Engine. There's not an academic version. There's not a indie version of it. There's not a professional version. There's one version of it. And the version that a university downloads is exactly the same version that Activision and Sony and anyone else downloads, and the source code that a university downloads is exactly the same. We don't dumb it down for the students. We don't do any of that stuff, which is really exciting, right? And I think that everyone appreciates the fact that it's a professional tool, and we provide it as a professional tool to future professionals, because it's never been more true that as a student, if you're not a professional the day you walk out of that institution, you're not ready for what's coming. So we want to make sure that we hand them a professional tool and offer them the opportunity to do professional quality work with it from day one.
We're also seeing, especially in the US, a huge push for STEM. How do you see that push correlating with people learning how to make games, or even how to program across multiple enterprise with something like Unreal?
I mean, this is a critical element. There are so many people, my phone rings off the hook, and we hear a lot of people requesting the technical skills coming out of the tool set. The most valuable people working in Unreal Engine are those people that know how to understand the physical environment that it presents, and in many cases that requires an understanding of physics, it requires an understanding of mathematics, it requires an understanding of art, and it's that sort of combination of bringing together, you know, those STEM skills inside the tool set to really bring across a vision that's both artistic and scientific and mathematical, all those things. The best artists at Epic and the best artists that we see, the user base working with Unreal Engine tend to be the byproduct of your best STEM students. And they tend to be the people that are most desirable in the employment arena for working with it. Now we're hearing a lot from the Hollywood folks saying, do you know where we can find more people skilled in using Unreal Engine who have that technical aptitude, who know how to make things look like water? Well, what does that mean? Well, you know, water is a very mathematical thing, you know, the way tides move and the way that foam works and crests. Most of it can be reduced to mathematical formulas in many cases, and with understanding of physics. The same thing with, you know, making things fall and break and shatter, and to make fire look like fire, and to make rain feel like rain, and to make animation and all those things actually work. There's a very strong artistic part of it, but the implementation is very technical in many ways. And so the real skill set coming out of the engine in many cases is quite STEM related. And so it's a great place to exercise that skill set.
Yeah, we're seeing Hollywood start to use Unreal for pre-visualization, having the real-time rendering. Is that correlating with
So they're using
jobs?
it for pre-visualization, but they're also using it for something that they're calling something like viz-viz, right? What that means is that directors, in many cases, they want to see the pre-visualization, but they also want to work. I don't know if you saw the SIGGRAPH, the Senua demo that we did. They want to be able to actually take a simulated camera and capture performance and see what they're seeing as near final picture, right? They want to know what they're looking at is, they want to be able to sign off on that when it's done at that moment. In other words, they don't want to go through post and have to approve it yet again. And you can now do that in a tool like Unreal Engine. You can look at it and say, that looks just like the lighting is going to look in the final picture. That looks like the character, you know, there may be a motion capture actor in front of me, but in what I'm looking at in my screen and what I'm capturing, it's a gorilla, you know. The environment, the explosions, the water, the physics, all that stuff looks like final picture. The framing is right, I'm signed off on it. Send it out to, you know, final render, and we're done. So they want to capture a movie as they're filming it, but what they see is actually what's going to be the final picture. And that's a different kind of filmmaking that is now becoming possible with the way that Hollywood wants to implement a tool like Unreal Engine and the new tool Sequencer. And that's going to become a reality.
We're also seeing studios like Bob, who is here, using Unreal now in virtual reality to tell stories, using CGI. Talk a little about the opportunities there in that new platform, that new medium as people explore VR.
Yeah, the idea of, you know, being in the middle of Fantasia, or no longer having to be a passive audience member in that kind of storytelling, I think is a really exciting thing. The immersion factor. Because we've unified the development platform and we have these powerful camera tools that mean that the language of film is actually inside the tool, that, you know, you can work with a real film back and you can work with real lens kits inside of Unreal Engine. Those people who are used to telling story through the convention of film can still do what they do, but then bring it into virtual reality and deliver that experience in a stereoscopic way. So it sort of transitions the medium, right? And you have to learn how to work in that medium, because it's, you know, stereoscopic rendering is kind of a different animal, but you still want to use the devices of storytelling. And people are doing a really nice job of finding new ways to tell a story with you in the middle of it. And I think it's going to be a really bright future to see what people can deliver.